Hello and welcome. So I saw this article on Zero Hedge. Satellite spots large wave rolling across Pacific as El Nino likely coming. And I mean, I haven't looked into El Nino, La Nina in the past, in terms of recent past. Like, I'm aware of them, but like, what's going on exactly? I haven't tried to understand them recently. And I was thinking, maybe this is something that I could understand because of what I see. So if we watch this, notably it's emanate like a heat, a change in the elevation and a heat, like the quantity of water as well as the temperature. Due to the temperature, it's like physically occupies more space. Presumably, I think that's what's happening. And it kind of emanates from here, like maybe it's generally thought to accumulate there. But my thought is maybe it's emanating heat from there that then is cycling outward into this stretch, especially like a tail. And so it emanates this heat from the mantle puncture hole here. Like, this is not a random location. This location is where a current was flowing here and swirling until it punctured it physically here, swirling here like this until it punctured the mantle at that location, but it was swirling here, and then it created these jets that like went up into North America and influenced North America. Is very intense location for current flows, and the mantle was punctured in India over here initially, but it's kind of like trying to drink from a container without an air exchange. Like, it doesn't work as well, so the process ended up opposite to here, focusing a lot of energy into this specific location right here, where all this energy was converging and swirling in a figure eight that then ended up puncturing the mantle again, creating like a exhaust valve to balance out the pressures. And then from this location, once this happened, the earth started to expand, like actually expand. Perhaps, I'm not completely sure if that's exactly when it was, but probably. Like, it was expanding, but all the pressure was contained under the crust that was still conjoined until this process, the puncture happened, and it could like expand due to the exchange that it allowed for. So this location has this was happening there, and then there's a relationship to the current coming in here, swirling, a current coming in here, swirling, another current holding a boundary. So it's basically causing this ammonite structure that then vented this way out into over into here, where essentially the boundary of this incoming current and then this current interacted, creating this location that pushed against South America that was there until it spaced it apart enough. And expansion occurred rapidly when the bonds between the broken continents actually fully broke, and then the ocean floor could fill in the space between. But so, like, the Galapagos hotspot over here, somewhere here, is very much tied to this location, is very much tied to this location. They're all tied, very connected, as being a result of the same thing, of this swirling energy in a location that had different tiers of functionality. Like, it occurred at the base, perhaps, was the more mantle type material that became the hot spot, and then above it was a layer forming of a structure and that exhibits the process with a puncture hole, I guess, below it. Like down below this, a downwelling occurred because of just the pressures of the dense material forming here relative to the surroundings. Like there's like a node there that possibly led to downward projections enough to puncture the mantle. So this location is highly relevant to what we're going to look at. This location is relevant more so towards Tahiti, which is over here at the boundary, pretty much at the boundary of where this current comes in and goes down, and it interacts as much as it can. Like it goes mostly here, but there's still a boundary here that interacts with the current. It makes it sort of part of this system down here more so than over here. So right around the boundary here is another relevant location, and then over here is another relevant location. Okay.
In a normal, unremarkable year across the southern Pacific Ocean, warm, moist air rises very high on the Asian side during the late summer, causing the unsettled weather and heavy rainfall patterns that are typical of that region at that time of year. The high-level warm air then returns across the Pacific back down to the lower, cooler east side, perpetuating the phenomenon we call the trade winds. Occasionally, though, those winds weaken significantly and the warmer waters flow back to the South American side, usually reaching their strongest point along the coast of Peru around Christmas time, which is why Peruvian fishermen nicknamed this phenomenon the Christ Child or El Niño, which literally translates as the son or little boy. During an El Niño phase, it's the rising air in the eastern part of the Pacific that causes more.
I muted myself. I was saying that the Christ angel is called the the Christ Son, Christ angel. I already forgot. But wait, Christ child. But it's in the location of this angel, which is interesting.
More stormy and rainy conditions over here. Meanwhile, the air over in the western Pacific is descending, which tends to cause conditions that are more stable than average. In a normal, unremarkable year.
Okay. So I put this there. We've got Australia, the ammonite structure here. Here's the mantle puncture hole, secondary one that will form there. So they're very close, and then they start to physically push until space grows between them by current flows causing pressures to separate them. So then it basically gains separation away from Australia to a point where it's over there now. but also separation from over here. So it really, there's some focusing of energy, not exactly like underneath, but like between, more so like here, which is what leads to the Galapagos hotspot. So there's a relationship to the Galapagos hotspot to this location, this location. Here's notably the mantle puncture hole is here, and here's the angel, like, spiral center, presumably a little bit off scale, so it's because of the wrong radius of the Earth, more so like actually atop it when it was here. Here's the ammonites. Ammonites. Feel free to pause, go back and pause. Angel with a trident. Boundary of El Nino seems to be divided over there. Mantle puncture hole, secondary one. Another the image of that. And then my phone is blowing up, man. And then holy shit. What's up? Oh, nice. Thanks, man. Then image where the heat is emanating from here, seemingly. And then basically the way I see it, like when the Earth expanded, it went through extinction phases, and then it went through ice ages that occurred, is my interpretation, where basically, depending on the method of measuring ages, have been separated from one another in terms of like timing of it all, but really were one after another. And I think of the KT boundary as being especially tied to the like 12,900-year-old, the Younger Dryas floods. It was like essentially at the KT boundary. So there was this explosive at the KT boundary. What was happening is this system was just popping off to a point where it literally supernovaed. I couldn't handle it anymore, and it just blew up, inducing the ring of fire in the entire Pacific, as well as shoving things apart and inducing the expansion of the Earth, like the rapid phase of expansion of the Earth. So then, after that occurred, it led to a cooling phase, almost like a reaction, activation energy. Like it had an input energy of, say, this much to reach this energy level from this energy level, but then the reaction proceeded to then down to here. So it has a release of energy. So there's a phase of absorption and a phase of release between equilibriums. And I would say that that's what's going on. Maybe this is the El Nino in the release phase, where it's really actually releasing energy, like this, like releasing energy, absorbing energy, releasing energy. Where like El Nino is closely tied, perhaps, to this side of things. Just a thought, or it could also be going more like this, where it has a activation energy, but then a release that's greater than the activation energy to decay to a lower energy state overall for the mantle puncture hole location, which would kind of make sense generally, that it would decay to a lower energy level because it's not being input as heavily anymore. There's not like a focus of current sat at the location anymore. So it's more so just like the remnants of what happened. There's also aspects of El Nino where it releases heat into the atmosphere, which makes me think of the presence of the South Atlantic anomaly. Like this is the remnants of the doom shape that was involved in the puncturing of the mantle puncture hole in India and Pakistan. This here relating to the doom shape that moves across here and down this way that I talk about in lots of places. And so then when it created Girnar, discharged energy into Girnar, which we can see better on this map, of course. It moved. Literally, this storm, vortex storm, moved this way, sat here, moved over here, sat here a bit, moved down here, all the while exchanging energy into the mantle at the mantle puncture hole here. And then it moved down here where it basically helped direct basalt flows from the mantle puncture hole across this region, creating the Saurashtra Peninsula and all of its nuances, and discharged energy though. Like lightning strikes as it moved this way to here, discharging energy into the Saurashtra Peninsula, and then down to here where it finally discharged, at which point it moved away. And I believe it moved away over and now is moving to basically the secondary mantle puncture hole. Like it's not randomly moving, it moved from one puncture hole to the other. And now as it approaches the other one, like El Nino is effectively perhaps discharging energy into this system again and causing it, because it's said that the doom shape will return. So presumably it's discharging energy from this process into the atmosphere of El Nino, into the atmosphere that then feeds into the doom shape. Because the Earth is just doing things that are like chemistry and processes in physics that are not necessarily known that well, but on a scale from a different angle where it's not immediately apparent, but it's in such nuanced detail that it sheds light on things that are not presently known. But like this is probably moving to here, slowly but surely moving there. South Atlantic anomaly motion. Images. 1920 is over here. 1880, a little further east. So in 40 years it moved a little bit, and then 40 again, 40 again to 2000. So supposedly at 2000 it was focused there, and then at 2020 it's a little further over. Its outer ring is starting to reach like its largest effect, especially if we include this green region around it, is starting to reach the mantle puncture hole, secondary one. Maybe relating to why it's got this, it's shooting off like an offspring system. It's because it's got energy feeding into it again. Because it really wasn't, it didn't have that system until recently. Maybe when that like separates, something major will happen. because it's possible to like shoot it off. Like, all right, fed like it's got like an umbilical cord, and then it feeds it, and then it like cuts its connection of enough to sever the connection and be a separate system that maybe then they start to physically interact and push with repulsion rather than like if this flow wraps in here, then it would be pushing against this rather than going around it and like hugging it. So then it maybe pushes it away, pushes this a little bit further towards the mantle puncture hole, which probably would begin to descend closer to the earth. Like this thing is basically a blob resting on the ionosphere and pushing down, creating this anomaly in my interpretation. Just an undetectable system that's there because it's like subtle, composed of ethereal particles rather than dense atoms that are stably like connected and squished together to be like a nucleus of a system. It's just composed of ether rather than atoms. So, something is up here. Let's see if I can find in that video. The pressure switches, so it's got high pressure generally centered on Tahiti, and then high pressure centered, presumably centered on Darwin when it switches. Looks like it's really centered around this region, which if we look over here, let's see. It's like where this is. This like valve thing of the ammonite, I'm not sure. What did I call it? I didn't name it. Jaw, gut, and buccal mass up here. I'm not sure. But like it's got an ammonite shape here, and then a secondary one that goes kind of out here. Possibly related to Odin's eye that's missing here. Like it looks like it kind of spirals out this way and wraps to here as a boundary while spiraling the other way here. Not sure why that would be. Switching pressure like a valve, like over here. This region and how it caused vibrations in the Himalayas. Let's see what else we got. Just right there. It's definitely focused on this region. Oh my god, that's incredible. It's interesting it goes up. Okay, let's see. The term El Nino applied to an annual weak warm ocean current that ran southwards along the coast of Peru and Ecuador at about Christmas time originally. However, over time, the term has evolved and now refers to the warm and negative phase of El Nino Southern Oscillation. I guess that's Australia. That's definitely Tasmania. This doesn't seem to want to show. Or South America. I see. Here. So possibly from the mantle puncture hole running down like through Indonesia and going across. Like this one going across this way and then kind of just draining down this way. Cross here, cross here, cross here, cross here, and then just across to here. Without really being because of, but related to, like it's passing some kind of exchange between the mantle puncture holes as they balance the undercurrents that are still occurring. Are definitely occurring, like if we look at earthquake map. Like most of the earthquakes are, a lot of them over here. Let's go 7 days, 4.5 plus. Like lots going on here. Also, there's something. That's right. I was gonna try to find it. I think he drew. Yeah, I did. Here we go. Secondary one. So if we look at this one, in line with the Tarim Basin-ish, and with Yellowstone. So if we look over at here, basically in line with this location, which if we go generally across here, there's the mantle puncture hole. So like if there's a current flowing this way that goes through this region, across here, and then kind of makes its way to Yellowstone, or like that's generally where it's going, towards Yellowstone as some sort of drainage point where overpressures are brought that way because it's got a lot of room to store energies here with all the like open space, maybe, I don't know, also being where things are focused. So maybe there's a relationship to this aspect because it seems like it really connects over here and coming from the mantle puncture hole though.
Allowing the warm water.
Let's check out this animation real quick. I'm not watching from here. Notably, there's like a cool spot around north of it. There's cool spots surrounding it, and then heat comes out of it and literally bursts out of it there. Possibly being fed from up here at this point. There's so much potential. I'm like, there's a bond here between these two continents. And there's some kind of element of the South American continent that has exchange going on. Almost like it's reactive or not balanced. Like it's like fluorine, for instance, something that's not balanced and highly reactive. But where it like has this wall of this bond, the bond itself, the physical wall, prevents like a swirling location that energy then is fed back to this system. Like it just prevents the flow sufficiently to cause like a exchange into the mantle drainage or mantle puncture hole location. Very closely tied to that location. And really one to like showing point of origin. Like these are 3 and 4. Some sort of relevant point of the mantle puncture hole there. It matters for El Nino. 100%. It's relevant to El Nino. This is average. Warm episode relationships. Warm, dry, wet and warm, wet and warm. Wet and warm. Wet, warm. Wet, jet, wet and cool. Warm, warm, warm. I muted myself again. It's almost like it creates some kind of like it squeezes like the snake head, like it, for instance over here where it has the snake head with the jaw, and then within it is the Colombian River basalt, and then another snake head with a jaw, maybe here also, with the Idaho batholith, where they tend to do that, where they like create the snakehead type feature because they're going around a resistance. So for there to be whatever I was just looking at, this structure with this structure, like it's going around dry and cool would suggest like it's absorbing energy in that stretch down under. Some phase where it's like the energy is draining in. I don't know. And then another phase where it's emitting, just inducing like an aura of wet and warm because it's emitting wet and warm from the mantle puncture hole there, whereas here it's like not emitting wet or warm because it's cool, so it's like absorbing any heat that it can and not releasing water the same. I definitely gotta look into this more. Far close to the Mediterranean shows 2 to 7 year variability, closely related to ANSO periodicity. Model simulations show that there is more correlation with ENSO than NAO. North American oscillation, maybe. And that there is a strong teleconnection with the Mediterranean due to lower gradients of temperature. Basically trying to determine El Nino. Interestingly, no evidence for it before the mantle puncture hole, like before 65 million. It's just definitely still kind of recent for this evidence, like 6 million versus 65 million. It'd be interesting if we had evidence that generally dated back to around the KT boundary for this. But in the least, that's interesting. Okay. Warm, dry, wet. La Niña is the opposite. So if we just go here, check out some images real quick. I know this guy's. Okay, here we go. La Niña. Still kind of pointing at that location. This one, interestingly, is pointing the average conditions at that location at the Panama, the bond. At that location at the bond and at. I'm not sure what to make of that location specifically. Possibly this bond related. That broke, but possibly not. I mean, there's this, like, Nova Center location. And maybe it can feed into here pretty easily from that way. I don't know if it's feeding into, but it's quite incredible that it points right to that location. Flows in, flows out. Exchange between Australia and the secondary mantle puncture hole, and the secondary mantle puncture hole, and I guess Indonesia and Southeast Asia, I guess. Possibly with more relationship to the ammonite structure than is apparent in this. It seems related. It's not like overlapping completely, but it's heavily overlapping and possibly closely tied energetically for some reason that I'm not, just by the like geometries. Whew. Incredible. All right, I'll be back. Peace, guys.